I think I mentioned like, no, I don't have any body dysphoria. I'm fine. Like
Yeah.
having a vagina is fine, which I still believe is true for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to change anything in that aspect. But starting tea made me realize how much bottom dysphoria I actually have,
Wow.
which is, I think I always had it, but never really realized the dysphoria was there.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been simultaneously a really beautiful experience, a really coming home experience for me. Because dysphoria for me is also an affirmation of my gender.
Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. We get curious about all things gender, sex, and sexuality, as well as relationships, feminism, the inclusive kind, mental health and kink, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. If you like what we do and want to make a contribution, you can become a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender or buy us a coffee. Links are on the website. Now, join us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance, and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I am a queer woman, and my pronouns are she and they. In this episode, I have a conversation with Kai Gray, a garden designer and consultant and CEO at Polaris Garden and Landscape Architects. Kai's pronouns are he and him, and he is transmasculine, transgender, queer, and a tad non-binary. Find out what that means to Kai in this episode. We also talk about the importance of representation, experiencing intimacy and sex and navigating expected as well as unexpected changes, being on testosterone, consent and re-establishing boundaries, separating masculinity and femininity from body parts, qualities, and dynamics like dominance and submission, and never being done with transitioning. It was recorded on the 1st of July 2022. Now let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome. What's your name?
So my name is Kai Gray.
Hello, Kai. So let's talk a bit about gender. The last time we spoke was about 3 months ago, I believe, and you were just starting your journey with testosterone. But let's rewind a bit. First of all, what is your experience of your gender? What's your journey been like?
Oh, it's been such a long journey. I think I already knew I was trans when I was about 16, 17, but I didn't know the words back then. So I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. We didn't have any of the language in that time around, especially trans men. I knew about trans women, but didn't really understood what it was. And there was no real representation, especially in the Netherlands. There is a lack of information around these topics. And I think trans men are one of those fewer discussed options possible, especially
Yeah.
non-binary trans men is something, it's kind of recent. So for me,
Yeah.
it started around my 17th. I had an online persona, male, which I felt was really shameful and really hurtful. It was a hurtful experience for me back then because I lacked knowledge and language around it. And it was a big secret. That secret came out, which of course it would have been fine right now. But back
Yeah.
then I didn't really understand why it was such a joy to be. So the name that I used for myself was Joris, why I loved being him
Mm-hmm.
instead of using my dead name and all these kind of more
Mm-hmm.
female representations for myself. So
Yeah.
it started then, and then it continued. My exploration in gender continued via YouTube videos. I found a lot of trans guys on YouTube when I was a little bit older, and I showed my ex-partner and said like, hey, these are trans men. And I was really excited. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't understand why I was so excited. But it felt like finally I found people that looked and sounded and kind of acted like me, which might sound really strange to people. But for me, it was really important to see people that looked like me.
Mm.
Yeah, a little bit more like gay trans man felt more at home than the
Mm.
stereotypical cis men, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, really. Because, well, I was just thinking about how long we've known each other. Not very long. I don't even know how we met, but
Me
like we've
neither.
been on each other's radar on Facebook mostly for a while. And then I remember your coming out and your name change and all that stuff. So what made you come out when you did? What led up to that?
Ooh, that's such a good question. I have already had a lot of conversations around gender for about a year or so prior to me telling the world, like, hey, is my new name. This is my name, my pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of my labels, quote unquote, that I am comfortable using for myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I already had conversations around this for a year. And I remember people asking me about it while I didn't really understood myself what my gender was.
Mm-hmm.
So people had a couple of statements like, oh, I love that you talk about being non-binary, which is not really a label that I use for myself. Or, yeah, you're one of the guys. That's why you're so comfortable around cis men and why you love to be friends with men instead of dating them. So these were the conversations I had. And there was also a woman I dated for like a really brief time. And she said to me, "You're the most masculine person that I ever dated." And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh, I like that." And she
Yeah.
didn't like it because she identifies as a lesbian. So she didn't really see
Mm.
herself with me because I am too masculine for her, which is interesting.
It is.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the labels you were using when you came out, you gave me labels trans masculine, but you also talk about being a trans guy, all that stuff,
True.
trans queer, and then you said you're a tad non-binary. Do you feel like maybe you moved into the non-binary space on your journey to being trans masculine or a trans guy? I mean,
Yeah.
how did those labels fit together for you?
Yeah. Beautiful. So I think for me, it's the same when I came out as bisexual when I was 14. It
Mm-hmm.
kind of felt like an in between label, safe label to use. So you can dabble into the heteronormative world, but you can also dabble like in the queer space. And I
Mm-hmm.
think non binary is that space for me as well. It's the bridge between literally transition from female to male for me personally. So this is not, I'm not speaking for everybody, but for
Mm-hmm.
me it felt like a safe space to play with gender more
Yeah.
so than making a statement around it. And I
Ah.
feel still like a dash of salt of non-binaryism is there
Mm-hmm.
because I never would ever see myself as a cis man because I'm not. I'm a trans guy. I'm a trans man. So
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't ever be comfortable with using cis labels. And also, your question around what made me come out is I felt safe enough. I felt that I had enough language. I understood myself better. And then I could verbalize it to other people like, hey, this is how I want you to approach me.
Mm.
Yeah. Comfortable
Yeah.
enough to be myself, I think.
Awesome. Yeah. So, about 3 months ago, as I mentioned earlier, you were about to start your journey with testosterone. And how has that influenced, I mean, your journey? What's it been like being on T? And you've shared a little bit about it on Facebook, as I've read. Yeah. So, where are you at with that now?
Oh, I love talking about tea. It is, I think it's my favorite topic because let's see. So, what's the journey been like? It's been really a calming process,
Mm.
really reaffirming of my gender. And it's almost, if you take hormones, so I don't want to say that it makes you really a trans guy if you take hormones. Let's just take that out of the
Yeah.
equation because it's not. But for me personally, it was a good choice.
Mhm.
I wanted to reaffirm for myself and reestablish my gender. And it feels like someone switched on the lights for me, literally. Someone flicked that switch and it was like, oh yeah, motherfucker, you're on T. This is amazing. I love this. And especially sexually wise, I feel this is how I should experience sex for myself. And I wish
Mm.
I started way sooner with taking testosterone. So it makes me really calm, makes me really calm in my own personality. There's no highs and lows and almost a hyper state sometimes. That
Mm.
unsureness that I felt before is gone. Also, I feel that, so I have a lot of anxiety. That is my daily life, which is like the way
Mhm.
I am. But I feel that that's almost to a simmer now that I'm taking testosterone. Um,
Interesting.
and I love, so I wish my voice was way deeper, but it's like, it's already getting there. So that was my number one thing is voice dysphoria.
Mhm.
I love that in the future it will be way lower. So that expectation for me is there.
Mhm.
And I love thinking about that, like, oh yeah, your voice will drop, will be amazing,
Hmm.
because then it matches how I see myself.
Yeah.
And I think also the face changes is it's really astonishing what can happen in 3 months, and your muscles and hairy arms, and I love all things. Also bottom growth. I love all aspects of tea.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. There was one thing I wanted to sort of touch on when you said you came out as bisexual
True.
at 14,
Yeah.
and you said that was kind of a journey in a similar way to the non-binary thing. So do you feel like that was a step on the way of being? Are you just attracted to women? Is that what you're saying? Is that where you're at, or is that where you ended up?
Oh, I love this is a good question because I have no idea. My preference has always been women,
Hmm.
sexually, dating,
Hmm.
in a romantic way as well. But I find using so because I see myself as a trans guy, I would say that I'm all my friends say, "You're so straight. You're such a straight dude." Because every time a beautiful woman passes by, I'm like, oh, I cannot think anymore, I cannot function. But I would be so uncomfortable using a straight label for myself because I find it so limiting for me.
Hmm.
So I would say that I'm queer or sexually fluid because if I see a cis bisexual dude, I have the same response because of the femininity, usually. It's not an assumption, so not all bisexual guys are really feminine, but if they're feminine, I'm like, oh, so cute. But I kiss that person. So I think more
Yeah.
sexually fluid, queer than bisexual or straight. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So you from what it sounds like, maybe you're attracted to like feminine qualities and stuff. I mean, what does
Yes.
feminine even mean, right? So
Yes.
it's a big subject. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Do
So
you
everything
feel
that
your attractions have changed since being on T? Has something changed there or evolved?
mm, that is a really good question. I think when I think about having sex with guys,
Hmm.
so let's just say cis guys, because trans guys is a different kind of thing for me. Of course, we're all men, but
Yeah.
for me, it's a different level.
Yeah.
I would say if I now have to touch a cis guy sexually, I'm like, oh hell no! Like, oh, I wouldn't think about it.
Interesting.
And that is just an acceptance for myself now that I have tea. But I
Hmm.
would love to kiss everybody. Like kissing is amazing. So
Right.
right. I wouldn't limit myself. But when it comes to taking off clothes of someone else, let it just be a woman. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. 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 And how are you experiencing like physical intimacy and sex now that you're on T? So has that changed for you?
That has changed so much.
Mm.
I've always been this horny motherfucker. I love having sex with everybody. I just love it so much.
Yeah.
But that was pre-T. It was more a concept in my mind. And I had to build up to the desire way more, like telling myself stories about that person in my mind, fantasies,
Mm.
really build up the fantasy with that person prior to being intimate with someone. Now it's just when I get aroused physically, I'm aroused mentally as well. And I'm just ready to take on whatever opportunity comes my way. And it feels like a nuclear bomb going off. This is a quote from I think her name is Mercury. It's a trans woman, and she says, and it's right, it's like a bomb going off, and you're just I told the person that I'm dating, we're in an open, nonconformist thing that we have.
Hmm.
The person that I'm dating, I said to her, I turned into a stereotypical guy. When I'm horny, I cannot think, I cannot function, I cannot speak. And I love it. I love for myself to be so dumb that I can only have sex with someone. And I said this to someone recently, one of my friends. I said, if there will be an apocalypse, I would repopulate the world with my horniness. Whether I have sperm or not, I am capable. I'm just ready to.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking about what you said about your the fantasies you maybe felt like you needed to use before you were on T.
Yeah.
Was that to do with like the whole scenario or the other person, or maybe how you felt in yourself and in with your gender? Was it to
Yeah.
do with that more?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It's definitely a gender thing. So
Hmm.
I had a phase in my life where I presented quite feminine. Really uncomfortable with that label, but I felt I needed to belong within a heteronormative dynamic. So my ex-partner, cis male, I felt I needed to be that person for him. Feminine,
Hmm.
in the bedroom, a bottom, just
Hmm.
l- doing that experience with him because I love intimacy. I loved intimacy with my ex-partner,
Hmm.
but sex was always a thing that I had to set the stage for myself. Like I had to be ready and prepared, which is an aspect of femininity that I didn't like for myself. So others
Hmm.
could be really enjoying that part. I can't, like, I couldn't really enjoy it. It was more of, okay, we have to get this done. I love to be intimate with you, but just have to be prepared for that and have to be feminine and really, I don't know, it wasn't
Mm.
way more. This is going to sound weird. So if my ex partners, multiple all, will listen to this, it's going to sound like I'm rejecting them, but it's not. For me,
Hmm.
it felt like I needed to act feminine in the bedroom and in those relationships.
Mm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. It's like, I guess, playing a role almost.
Yes,
That's not really you, but thinking that is how it's supposed to be. This is how
true.
I'm supposed to be.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting. Wow. Yeah, so when it comes to experiencing intimacy and sex, do you have any more you'd like to share about your experience on T and that?
Yes. Let's talk about penises, can we?
Let's talk about penises. Why not?
I love it. Yeah, it's a really good topic for me. So
Yeah.
when we spoke, I think I mentioned like, no, I don't have any bottom dysphoria. I'm fine.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
having a vagina is fine, which I still believe is true for me.
Hmm.
I don't want to change anything in that aspect. But starting T made me realize how much bottom dysphoria I actually have,
Wow.
which is, I think I always had it, but never really realized the dysphoria was there.
Hmm.
And that has been simultaneously a really beautiful experience, a really coming home experience for me. Because dysphoria for me is also an affirmation of my gender, which,
How interesting. Wow.
yep, it's like, oh yeah, you're really trans. That's really there. Like you have this dysphoria, how horrible it actually is, but still it's an affirmation like, oh yeah, I feel this. But
Mm.
also, so it's a beautiful experience, but also a hard experience to come to terms with. Like, so let me describe it this way for people who are listening. When I have sex with the person that I'm dating right now, there are moments that are so intimate between her and me. She uses she, her pronouns. And when I have sex with her, there are times when I want to penetrate her with my own body, so a penis,
Hmm.
which I don't have.
Hmm.
So that has been a really painful but also beautiful experience. Coming to terms with, it's like a phantom penis. You think you have it at the moment, but you don't. You realize like it's not there. Like there is a part of me missing,
Hmm.
which has been really interesting. And she's okay with me talking about this, so I just wanted to put it out there. She's
Yeah.
fine, because she says like the more representation around trans topics, the better.
Totally.
And she has, in the bedroom when we have sex with each other, she can make me feel really masculine. The way she
Hmm.
touches me, the way she affirms my gender, the way she speaks to me, especially when we have sex, the way that she touches me is really, really, she's feminine, I'm masculine, which is super amazing. So having these
Mm.
really intimate moments with her, especially when I have bottom dysphoria during sex, It's been such an eye-opening experience for me.
Mm.
Really intimate, but really eye-opening.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds amazing. Because you mentioned bottom growth, which is something that happens if you take testosterone, right? So how is that feeling? How are those changes? How are you experiencing those changes for yourself?
Oh, that's a cool question. It feels like so, especially when I have sex with her, I notice it. Like, oh
Hmm.
yeah, stuff is growing down there. So
Yeah.
I'm growing a small penis, which is really fascinating.
Yeah.
And prior to tea, I thought I'm not sure if I want it. I had a little bit of anxiety around it, a little bit of
Mm.
insecurities, like, oh, what if it will look weird?
Mm.
Which it's not. Like it grows so slowly. It's just a part of your body that's growing, just
Mm.
like you're growing your hair out or something.
Yeah.
But you're growing a penis, which is funny, I think. And every week it feels like I have a new body part. So every week we have to reestablish when we have sex how she should touches me for me to orgasm,
Hmm.
which is super cool to do. Like it is really fun.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
every week it's different. Like, oh, now you need to do this. Okay, well, fine. Yeah,
That is so fascinating. I think it just highlights how important it is to have these conversations with each other because there's, I think, too many assumptions going on, and
yes,
there's things we don't talk about with our partners that
true.
we really should be talking about.
Yes, yep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Regardless of gender or
Yes,
sexuality. Yep,
totally. Yeah,
yep,
even in cis het dynamics, there's
absolutely.
there's assumptions like women's women enjoy this, women should be doing this, they should be experiencing this, they should be feeling this. The same with men actually.
True.
Men should be, this way and they're allowed to be this and not that. There's so much going on in there that definitely needs to be challenged, I think.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, how do you foresee things going forward? Do you have more thoughts on, like, I mean, what was expected and what was unexpected? I guess we've talked a little bit about that already, but do you have any more thoughts about expected versus unexpected changes since you've been on tea?
Yeah. So when it comes to my wishes, the only thing taking tea for me was my voice. So I really wanted my voice to drop, be way
Hmm.
more like I see myself and also how I think I sound versus how I really sound.
Hmm.
I wish that would have dropped more, but one of my friends said to me recently, and I thank her for it, she said, but you have voice dysphoria. You don't even hear the changes in your own voice at the moment. And she
Mm.
constantly says to me, your voice is dropping. Please, dude, send me voice memos because your voice is so sexy. Just my friends are getting off on my trans experience, which is funny, which I allow them to. And I think unexpected is how much my face is changing. I
Mm.
didn't realize how different I would look. And there's also some fears attached to that, I think, which
Hmm.
is, I haven't heard this before, but it's, so I come from a really strange family, a weird family.
Right.
And I don't want to look like any of my family members,
Mm.
especially the feminine side. So I thought about this today. Like, okay, I'm okay with looking like the male side of my family,
Hmm.
even though my family is a little bit like they're weird. Like, I don't want to be remembered of my weird family. But if I look too much like the feminine side of my family, I'm like, that's too feminine. I don't want to be reminded that I had a period in my life where I looked more feminine. And also going forward, I one of my gender specialists that I talked with, she said to me, in a couple of years, you will be so masculine. You will look so masculine. And at that moment, I thought, well, we will see. I prefer more the androgynous side. I prefer people to question my gender a little bit more.
Hmm.
But on T, I realized how masculine I actually desire to look,
Mm.
which changed for me a little bit. So she said to me, in a couple of years, you will be so masculine. I'm like, and now I'm ready for that to happen. I'm like, yeah, just make it happen now instead of waiting a year. So the patience thing is really hard when you are medically transitioning, because it just takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought I would be like, there's no ready in transitioning, so there's no end game, I think, for me.
Hmm.
But I thought I would be there like in a half year or so, like, oh yeah, let's see in a half year. And this is what my ex-partner constantly asks of me, like, when do you think you're done
Mm.
transitioning? I think I will never be completely done. And kind of next steps or questions for me, what I really want is to chop everything off, like chop my boobs off would be a really good thing for me.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Yep. And then I have been doing like some thoughts and reading and listening to podcasts and interviews around all the options with bottom growth. What else
Hmm.
can you do?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that I don't want phalloplasty. So I don't want to create a penis out of another body part.
Hmm.
That is something I'm sure of because the operations are so extreme
Mm.
still. And further, I'm thinking of like playing with packers for now, see how that feels. So packer is like
Hmm.
a penis that you buy, attach it to yourself, and that's how I can explain it.
Stick it in your pants, basically.
Stick it in your pants and see how it feels like.
Yeah.
That would be a fun experiment. I'm
Mm.
excited for that one.
Nice. Yeah. I like that. In your sort of journey of discovery and learning about the subject of like being trans and transmasculine and all that, what was it that you felt you really wished was easier to access? What is information that you struggled to find that you've learned that you, I don't know, wished was easier to find?
Oh, I think this is a beautiful question and a statement in and on itself.
Mm.
When I was 17, I wish a lot of people would tell me back then it is okay to play with gender. It
Hmm.
is fine if you're not sure. It is fine if you wanna one day you wanna be want to represent as a guy, the other day you want to represent female or androgynous, or you want to play with expression. That is
Mm.
totally fine. I wish I would have known when I was 17. Also, literally the name of your podcast, 50 Shades of Gender, I wish I would have known that there's so much variety and playfulness within not only sexuality wise, because that is totally a different topic, but also gender wise. I wish I would have known that it's literally okay. Like, it's always better to be playful than to suffer.
Mm. Put that on a
Um,
t-shirt, right? Wow.
Sorry?
Put that on a t-shirt. Absolutely.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
And still, I still have a lot of fear around what would other people say.
Mm.
So it is the outside world this is a myth around transitioning, medically transitioning. I think that
Hmm.
the taking medications and doing alterations through your body makes you suffer. No, it is actually for me, it's how other people perceive me or my fears around perceptions of others, which is really hard. Someone yesterday that I haven't seen for a long time on one of the side gigs that I'm doing, I met that person and she recognized me from before. And she blurted out in a room full of people, she blurted out my dead name,
Oh.
which was really hard for me. It was like, I was like, motherfucker.
Oh
And I
no.
said, no, it's Kai.
Yeah.
I really had to. So it is, I have to deal with discomfort of others
Mm.
all the time.
Hmm.
And that is the hard part. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, how have you've got kids, haven't you? How have they been with your transitioning and your process?
Oh, that's a funny question. So my kids both have gender neutral names.
Hmm.
I've chosen that on purpose because I said then, and I didn't realize why I said it. I said, I wish for them, for my kids, that they have a choice when they're older.
Hmm.
I didn't realize why, because my dead name is really feminine.
Hmm.
And I always hated my dead name. It's so horrible for me when someone mentions it.
Hmm.
So I said, like, let's have them gender neutral names. I let them play with gender.
Hmm.
And I ask them from time to time, especially like when we have some free time, like, hey, what do you feel like today? Do you feel like a girl or a boy or in between? Or we
Hmm.
play with that concept a little bit for them.
I love
And
that.
usually they like, oh yeah, I feel like a girl or feel like a boy or whatever in between, a little bit more in between. Usually they say, and then it's always, when we talk about these things, it's always pretty quickly around, can I have a snack now? Can I have something to eat?
Yeah, I'm done talking about it. Feed me. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. They're really bored with the topic, but they're trying on labels for me. So do they call
Mm.
me mom? Do they call me dad? Do they call me something else? Parent? And I notice, especially my oldest son, he makes statements to other people and saying like, yeah, but my mom wishes now to be a dad, so I'm calling him a dad. And
Mm.
he's really firm around it, firming and establishing
Amazing.
boundaries. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really
That's
cool.
so cool.
Yep.
Yeah, because if you think about it, obviously, as both being Dutch, right? And I mean, I've lived in the UK now for almost 23 years. Yeah, wow. But like from what I remember, I mean, the Netherlands is they're very open. They're very, I don't even know what word to choose. But things always felt like you can talk about sexuality, all the things. It's very open. It's very accepting in a way.
True.
But also, like when it comes to gender, since I've moved to the UK and met loads of people here, it's like, wow, it's really opened my eyes. And I don't remember, obviously, I haven't been in the Netherlands for a long time. So obviously, I wouldn't have seen that anyway, I guess. But I don't know if it's the same in the Netherlands, like if it's as accessible. I mean, from your journey and what you've been through, it doesn't sound like there's
No,
a lot of information out there
not at
or,
all.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
So
interesting.
I live in a really small province,
Hmm.
and the conversations are really awkward here to have. So with the
Mm.
school of where my kids go, this week someone approached me as if this is a secret. I'm an openly trans guy. I mentioned to everybody that I'm transgender and what my
Mm.
pronouns are, and I'm really open minded. But they approach this still as a form of gossip or a secret or something that is
Mm.
shameful or weird. And
Wow.
even my ex partner he says he's open minded, but when I really listen to him and his parents, they're not as open minded as they wish they are, which
Mm.
is normal for the Netherlands. So we think we're really an open minded country and really liberal, but we're actually not when it comes to gender issues. We're
Yeah.
so not open.
Yeah, liberal, that's a good word.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, because I remember when I was growing up, it was all, people, were lesbian, gay, bi, it was all fine, it's all part of life and it's all good. And yeah, but when it comes to gender, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, what is this thing?
true.
Yeah, it seems very different. Like it seems to be a bigger gap almost between the
There
sexuality
is.
side and like the
Yes.
concept of gender and wrapping your head around that. Yeah, which I
Yeah,
found really
but I
interesting.
think it ties back to representation. So I'm now in
Mm,
a can I share this? Because it's a really funny story.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm in a funny stage in my transition. So people cannot read me anymore,
Hmm.
which way I'm going, which is super fun for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like if you're maybe presenting in a more androgynous way, people don't know like whether you're transitioning to, you know, male or
Right.
female in a way. Although those terms
So
are not used by everyone. But
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So one of my colleagues for the freelance jobs that I'm doing, she approached me and she said, yeah, I heard something. I don't know if I can ask you questions around it. And I was like, okay, here's the big secret, the big reveal around what did you hear? And then she said to me, yeah, I heard something. And I said, yeah, I'm trans, I'm transgender. And she said, yeah, so you're transitioning to female, right?
Yeah.
And I laughed really hard. And I said, thank you for saying that because that is so reaffirming to me. And she didn't
Right.
understand that she
Yeah.
read me as male transitioning to female, which is
Hmm.
super funny for trans guys. This is one of the ultimate experience, I think. Like, oh yeah,
Right.
you think I'm cis. This is great. So indeed, they only think male to female trans people exist.
Hmm.
They don't think that female to male trans people exist. They don't realize that that's a possibility as well. Yeah,
Mm.
which is interesting.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of the media is very focused on, especially trans women, and unfortunately, they're getting a lot of grief
Yep.
from all sorts of sides. But yeah, that seems to be when people think of a trans person, they think of a trans woman mostly.
Sure.
I from what I've observed. So
Yep.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, the labels trans masculine and then trans guy or trans man. How did they fit? Do you feel like both those labels fit you? Because I know you've mentioned being a trans guy, and in the labels you've given me transgender and transmasculine. So I just wondered how, how that fits together for you, and what transmasculine means, and what being a trans guy means, and are they different? How are they different?
Oh, I
If you
love
have
that.
any,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a good question
cool.
around labels. So for me, when I wanted to come out as trans, I was looking deliberately around the right labels to fit. And
Hmm.
then I heard someone refer to themselves as trans masculine non binary.
Hmm.
And I was like, yeah, I'm trans masculine. Of course, obviously. And also, masculinity in and of itself is a really interesting concept because we assume what masculinity is. While trans guys, trans men like me, who also have a transmasculine expression, can shine a different light on masculinity, what it
Hmm.
actually means to be a masculine person,
Mm.
regardless of gender. So, gender expression, gender, I don't want to intertwine these two things. So, we can show that masculinity has nothing to do with aggression, for example.
Hmm.
That is one of the first things that people think when you go on T. You get really aggressive and really male and dominant. And
Yeah,
yes,
like alpha male, right?
yes,
That
an
kind of
alpha
thing.
male. And I know from a lot of people that I always called me intimidating, dominant, which is true. But there comes a calmness with my dominance. And there's also a real calmness to my essence, but also my masculinity. I was, again, this is a really funny story. I was at a friend's house and I brought her flowers. So I've been a florist for 3 years. I was a florist for 3 years
Hmm.
prior to designing gardens. And I brought her flowers. And she wanted to finick around with the bouquet. And I said, no, you sit down. I will arrange these flowers for you. I grabbed a vase, never was in her house. I grabbed a vase, arranged the flowers for her, cut all the flowers. And
Hmm.
she said, you are so masculine, but you're so calm. You just take over this space that is my house,
Hmm.
arranging flowers for me while I sit down with a cup of tea. That is masculinity to me. So, yeah,
Mm.
so that's why masculinity fits to me, trans masculine.
Hmm.
I would never call myself just a man or a guy because I find the label trans so important for me.
Hmm.
I find it really important that people know and understand that I am trans, that
Hmm.
it's not a transition from to, but it is part of my identity.
Mm.
I am assigned female at birth and I will always be. So that is also part of who I
Hmm.
am. And then also a trans guy. If I say trans man, that feels too finished for me.
Interesting. Yeah, that
Feels
makes
like a
sense though.
final stage, yeah, which
Yeah.
I think I will never reach.
Mm.
Because going on T also helped me embrace a feminine part of myself. So
Mm.
if I would think I'm a man, I would automatically think of a straight cis man, which I would never want to be ever.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. So do you feel like then, yeah, what masculinity means has been a real discovery, and also you've redefined what femininity means to
True.
you?
Yep. Yep.
Mm.
There is a soft and really caring side to myself
Mm.
that it has always been there. I love like cooking for people, and I love those are aspects that we tie easily to
Yes.
femininity.
Yeah.
That is a social construct, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a empathic, softer side to me, and I would assign these to female characteristics. I
Mm.
am quite like domesticated, and I love my house and all these. I love flowers and all these things. So you could say
Mm-hmm.
that those are feminine aspects, and they fit beautifully in my masculinity, I would say. Yeah,
Mm. Yeah, I love that. It is interesting, isn't it? All the qualities we assign
true.
masculine and feminine to, whereas in the end, they're just qualities that we all have
Yes.
to some degree. Some
Yeah.
people are more nourishing or nurturing or caring, and other people are more, I don't know, proactive. And I don't know what you want to call it, but it's interesting to me that we assign those masculine and
Yeah.
those feminine, you
Yeah.
know? They're just
Absolutely.
qualities. They're
Yeah,
just
I'm
things we do.
just a human with all these traits. And I've
Yeah.
always been. So I've always been a
Mm.
really, when I meet people for the first time, I say, don't be taken back because I'm really fiery, but also really calm at the same time. I
Mm.
have this duality in my characteristics anyway, if they're
Mm.
masculine or feminine.
Yeah.
And it is interesting to play with these labels attached to it and
Mhm.
what they mean for me and for others. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't talked about yet? Feel free to check your notes.
Have we talked enough about sex? That's always the
No,
question.
never. We've never
No,
talked enough about sex. Let's talk
no,
more about sex.
no. Please, let's talk more about sex. Always.
I enjoyed talking about sex, actually. It's really funny because a lot of people, I think, especially, I think the Netherlands is a lot more open when it comes to that subject and talking about sex and stuff, whereas here people are a bit more reserved, to say the least. So,
True.
although it is obviously a subject that most people would talk about with, people they're close to or intimate with, and but not even enough in that way, to be fair.
No,
Anyway,
no.
that aside, what do you want to add about sex?
What do you want to know? I think
Yeah.
let's talk about some bad sexual experiences on
Okay.
in my transness. I think that
Yes.
is a
That
good
would be a good
subject to talk
subject.
about. Yes.
Yes.
So when I came to kind of a terms with my gender, so that has been already for like a year and a half in the making or so, I would say.
Hmm.
Didn't know the words for it, but I knew I don't merge with my assigned female gender at birth. I
Hmm.
just don't have anything to do with that. So last year I dated a lot of women, a lot,
Hmm.
a lot, especially straight women, which is really interesting
Hmm.
and fun for me. To chase of straight women is really, it's
Hmm.
something fun for me.
Yeah.
Straight, bisexual women, women that are questioning. And I remember a certain experience, which is sexually really interesting, but
Hmm.
also a little bit weird. I was going out with a girl to a club and we had a lot of fun. Some incidents happened on the dance floor, which was really fun for her and for me, but we were removed from the dance floor because it was a little bit too sexual.
Yeah.
She really enjoyed it, if you know what I mean. Um,
Uh-huh.
so, and then we went back to my hotel room and we made an attempt to I wanted to take off her clothes and all these things. I was laying on top of her and I was wearing a belt. And then she said something to me, which was so horrible. She said, at least now you have something in your pants. And
Weird.
it was really, really weird. Like at least it feels like you have something in your pants or something. And it was so shocking to me that she said that. It was so rude. that she referred to my absence of having a penis in that way. And
Mhm.
I was also a little bit drunk, and I showed her the door really rudely. I said, "Now you have to go. You have to leave. You just have to go home. I
Mm.
don't want to have you in my room." And I got really angry. And
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
so that was a really weird experience for me. So things not to say to a trans person
Mm.
is, don't point out the absence
Mm.
of somebody. It was a hurtful comment of someone. Um,
Yeah, I find it interesting how I think we project a lot of stuff on, we can, I think there's a bit of a disconnect, like maybe the way we see people, like someone might see you as very masculine,
True.
but then because we associate masculine with male, with man,
Yep.
with penis, with all those things are like really interlinked, then like we project that onto the other person, and therefore if something is not ticking all those boxes,
True.
then quote unquote it's missing, you
Yep.
know.
Yep.
It's really interesting when you think about it.
It is. Well,
Yeah.
what I realize in these kind of experiences is, why can't we approach it as a holistic event? So why does it have to be a certain way? Because you assume indeed my masculinity also requires me to have a penis, which,
Hmm.
if you ask the girls that I'm sleeping with right now, they're not missing anything. I think they're happy that I cannot impregnate them. That is
Right.
right.
Goodness me.
It
Yeah.
is a benefit. So
Hmm.
there was something else I was thinking about.
Hmm.
Yes. So the assumption also, in regards to boundaries, when I have sex with someone, there are things that I'm not comfortable doing, like
Hmm.
a lot of people have, but they don't always have to mention it. I have to reestablish my boundaries, especially sexually. So I don't feel comfortable right now taking off a binder and my t-shirt, for example, because I want to see myself as the most sexual version possible, which
Hmm.
is really masculine and also dominant in the bedroom. And there was a girl that I slept with last year a couple of times, and she constantly tried to overstep that boundary with me, saying like, "Oh,
Mm.
just take your clothes off. You don't have to be ashamed, and it's all fine." And then I
Mm.
constantly had to reaffirm her, it has nothing to do with shame. It has everything to
Mm.
do with how I see myself together
Yeah.
with another person. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, boundaries are such a big thing, and I've realized for myself this is something I never learned to
true.
do or set boundaries. So this is something I'm learning now or have been
Yeah,
learning, and that I think is an ongoing journey as well. And I think it's so important though to re-establish your boundaries. And I mean, I assume if you're happy to talk about it and asking you questions about
yeah,
it,
absolutely.
so those are the way you feel in yourself in a sexual setting. I mean, there might be things that you are like, okay, I will do these things, but not those. And there might be things that you feel like, I don't want those done to me. I don't want to
True.
be touched here. I don't want to be touched in that way. This is okay, but that is not. And I feel like we could all benefit from asking ourselves those questions, which
Yes.
we don't do enough?
No, especially in relation to others. So I don't
Yeah.
want to be penetrated
Hmm.
at all. That would remind me of having sex with cis guys. And at the moment, I don't want to be reminded of
Hmm.
those experiences, which in and on itself was about intimacy, has nothing to do with horrible experiences in that way. I just want to
Hmm.
put that out there,
Hmm.
because though at the moment, those were lovely experiences. But right now, I don't want to be penetrated. I also think you have to set those boundaries up front before you start having sex. So
Definitely.
the girl that I'm dating, she says it has been eye opening for her constantly talking about consent,
Hmm.
whether it's for her pleasure or mine. Before we had anything, we talked about consent all the time. Like, hey, what can you say? What can you do? Also, prior to having sex, she says it's the most horny experiences for her talking about consent before doing anything.
Amazing.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
I've never learned that myself. So when you said I've never learned this, I never learned this because I assumed it's about cis males' pleasure, not about
Mm-hmm.
my pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And now I feel, so for me, it's super horny when the other person gets off. I'm like, oh yes, just
Mm-hmm.
come because it's so nice for me when
Yeah.
we make that event happen. But
Mm-hmm.
the last part of sex is me coming because remember, I'm on testosterone. So when
Mm-hmm.
I orgasm, I'm done. I just want to go to bed and sleep.
Yeah.
But also, we have to be so the people that I'm now sleeping with are cis women. And the event of sex itself is long. It is really long. It's, I
Mm-hmm.
think, most sessions are like 6 to 8 hours of me fucking the other person. And then
Wow.
after the event, I'm just exhausted. And I'm now sleeping with someone, and she likes it really, really rough. And I
Mm-hmm.
say to her constantly, so I sometimes use a strap on, but I find my hands way nicer. It's because
Mm-hmm.
I feel the other person. She wants to be penetrated until my hands just hurt and are broken. That is her
Mm.
kind of stage of events. So if she
Mm-hmm.
would do that to me, I would feel so uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
because I would be more submissive. And I just
Mm.
don't see myself that way
Yeah.
sexually.
Yeah, yeah, that's another interesting connection, isn't it? Like the submissive side
Yes.
being more linked to like, the feminine or the woman or something like that, and the more dominant side being more linked to man. I mean, I think that is a general assumption, whereas I
It
think in
is.
the BDSM and kink communities, that assumption is not there. Do you know what I
No.
mean? This is just something that you can embody,
Yes.
kind of like the dick energy, big dick energy, spirit dick energy. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because I've had a conversation with Sophia in episode 6, I believe, who talked about having a light cock, like an energy cock,
Yes.
and embodying that organ in a
Yes.
way and playing with that energy. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. When I learned recently to visualize me having a cock,
Hmm.
everything changed for me. That is a life changing, but it's an energy you can play with. So I
Mm.
just want to put out there that I feel so she's a power femme. She's really powerful. The girl that I'm dating,
Hmm.
she's powerful. And I say to her, when you wear a black short dress, you have all control over me. Like
Hmm.
sexually, you are in charge because
Yeah.
you can do anything to me when you wear certain type of clothes or and she plays with that as well. Those
Mm.
she says she's not comfortable being the dominant one. She means not taking charge,
Hmm.
which has nothing to do with being dominant or submissive at all.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's such a fluid, it can be such a fluid thing,
yes,
can't it?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And I
Mm.
know she has power. So, and I know she's quite switchy.
Mhm.
She wouldn't admit it, but she's really switchy. At a
Mhm.
certain point when we have sex, she takes full charge of me. And she
Mhm.
says, now you're going to lay it down and I'm just going to do things to you that make you come. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, yes, miss.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
really
I
nice.
love
I
that.
love playfulness.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, yeah, whatever gender you are, you're playing with that fluidity of maybe dominance and submission. I want to talk a bit more about the difference there because that I feel like there's more there.
There
So,
is.
how do you see the difference between like being dominant or being submissive? And obviously, you can play with that dynamic in like a switch,
Yes,
way. Yeah, but embodying that or acting that out in a way, how is that different for you? Does that
I love
make sense?
this
Yeah.
is such a good question. Because the assumption is always that I am the dominant one, but everybody has there's
Mm-hmm.
different version of what that means for me to be the dominant one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I maybe have the right truth around this, not other people. So for me, I always initiate, whether it's sexually or in other every event in my life. I'm an initiator in and on
Mm-hmm.
itself. Does that make me dominant? I'm not sure. I think so.
Mm.
So I start sexual events. I always start them when I see someone that I want to sleep with. It's going to happen because I'm making it happen.
Yeah. Ah.
And that's also how I started dating this girl. It was a long time of me seducing her in between my sheets. It took me some time and effort. So
Mm.
the initiation in and of itself could be seen as dominant. It could also be seen as, again, one of those characteristics that I have anyway.
Mhm.
She reaffirms me constantly she doesn't want to take initiative. She doesn't want to start any kinds of events. She wants to be led. So whether it's making dinner reservations or going somewhere or an activity or canceling
Mhm.
or I don't know, choosing which movie to watch, she wants me to choose,
Mhm.
which I will do naturally anyway.
Mhm.
So, is that dominance? I'm not sure. It's just my version of how I am as a person. I like to
Mm.
be in control. I like to take all decisions. I like to lead
Mhm.
someone, whether it's on a walk or sexually, it doesn't really matter. I
Yeah.
am a natural leader anyway. So,
Mm. Yeah, so it's part of the dynamic you're in, and that I guess that dynamic could change or be fluid depending on who you're with. Because if you're with
yes.
someone who's maybe a bit more quote unquote dominant,
Yep.
you might find yourself a bit more switchy. It would be maybe a different, you would maybe change that up more. I don't know, because it could,
Me neither, but
yeah,
I think I would hate that experience of being
right,
someone that's dominant with me
yeah,
sexually.
yeah.
I would have a hard time, but it's also a good
Hmm.
invitation to try that out.
Yeah, it's interesting because you might find yourself naturally not attracted to people like that because that's just not your thing, you
No.
know. But if obviously some things you might only discover as you're dating people and having experiences with them.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I was on a date with a very dominant masculine person, and that's how I kind of discovered that I don't like to date these kind of, because it reminded me of some guys that I dated.
Mm-hmm.
While in general, I always dated very passive guys, quite
Mm-hmm.
feminine, passive, but feminine and passive is not related to each other at all.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
they had these kind of dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
I was always in control in relationships. So for me, if I'm talking about play and being so inviting to others to play with their gender and sexuality, it might also be time for me to play with a more submissive role or more switchy role, which
Hmm.
no, I
Yeah.
don't know if I would be
Yeah.
comfortable.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, each to their own. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Mm.
We've covered a lot.
We did.
Yeah.
We did. I loved it. No,
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much for talking with me about all these kind of things because
Yeah,
it's
it was so
important.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/Kai, where you can also read the transcript. And you can find Kai on polaris-landscape-architects.teachable.com, on Facebook and on Instagram. Links are on the episode page. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com, on social media, and on YouTube. Again, if you'd like to support us, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender or buy us a coffee. Links are on the website. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open minded. Cool. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, that's all I had on my list. And we've talked about more even then. So yeah. All
I
good.
hope you had enough juicy details.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so insightful. Like I always learn so much in these conversations.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's why I
cool.
love talking about it because it's also for me this is an exploration. So
Mm.
the more I talk about it, the more either I can choose a different path or be reassured or reaffirmed, which
Hmm.
is really important in gender exploration. One of my friends is
Absolutely.
a sexuologist. Do I call it that right? She's like a
Sexologist?
sexologist.
Yeah.
And she says you should have as much sex as possible now that you're on medical T because it's part of your gender exploration. How
Mm.
you are in the bedroom says as much about your gender as anything else. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, totally.
Yep.
Mm.
That's it.
Cool.
Loved it.
Excellent. Me too.